The dust kicked up by his horse's hooves seemed to hang in the scorching Arizona air longer than usual, as if even the earth itself was reluctant to settle. Samuel Mackenzie squinted against the harsh sun beating down on Tombstone's main street, his weathered hand instinctively reaching for the letter tucked inside his vest pocket. 3 weeks had passed since Jonathan Whitmore drew his last breath in that God-forsaken mining camp, and the paper had grown soft from Sam's constant handling. "Take care of Clara," Jonathan had wheezed, his blood seeping into the dusty ground. "Marry her, Sam. Promise me." The promise had come easy then, with his friend's life ebbing away, and gratitude overwhelming every other thought. Jonathan had shoved Sam out of the way when the mine support beam cracked, taking the full weight himself. Now, riding into Tombstone with trail dust caking his clothes and 3 days' growth on his jaw, Sam wondered what kind of fool makes such promises. The town sprawled before him in all its raw glory. Saloons lined the street, their doors swinging open to reveal glimpses of card games and working girls. Miners stumbled out into the afternoon sun, squinting and cursing. Somewhere a piano played off-key, and the metallic ring of a blacksmith's hammer provided steady percussion. The smell of horse manure, whiskey, and human sweat created a familiar frontier perfume that made Sam's nose wrinkle. He'd been to Tombstone before, back when the silver strike first brought men flooding in like ants to spilled sugar. That was how he'd met Jonathan, both of them young and foolish enough to think they'd strike it rich. Instead, they'd found back-breaking work, dangerous conditions, and a friendship forged in shared hardship. The Whitmore house sat on the respectable side of town, away from the saloons and brothels. It was a modest wooden structure with a small porch and actual glass windows, a sign of some prosperity. Sam dismounted, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. His legs, stiff from the long ride, protested as he tied his horse to the hitching post. He stood there for a moment, hat in hand, trying to summon the words he'd practiced on the trail. How did a man walk up to a woman he'd never met and announce he was there to marry her? Jonathan had spoken of Clara often around the campfire, painting a picture of a delicate flower who needed protection in this harsh world. "She's too gentle for this place," he'd said. "Too refined. She needs a strong man to shield her from all this ugliness." Sam knocked on the door, the sound seeming to echo in the relative quiet of the residential street. His mouth felt dry as desert sand. What if she laughed in his face? What if she already had a beau? What if? The door opened, and Sam's prepared speech died in his throat. The woman who stood before him bore little resemblance to the fragile creature Jonathan had described. Clara Whitmore was perhaps 25, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and intelligent brown eyes that assessed him with startling directness. She wore a simple blue dress, clean but faded, with sleeves rolled up to reveal capable-looking forearms. Most striking was the revolver holstered at her hip, worn as naturally as another woman might wear a brooch. "Yes," her voice was steady, neither welcoming nor hostile. "Miss Whitmore, I'm Samuel Mackenzie. He swallowed hard. "I was a friend of your brother's." Something flickered in those sharp eyes. Grief, quickly suppressed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Jonathan, he passed 3 weeks ago. Mining accident." She stood very still for a moment, then stepped back. "Come in, Mr. Mackenzie." The interior was sparse but clean. A few pieces of sturdy furniture, a bookshelf with well-worn volumes, and, surprisingly, a rifle mounted above the fireplace. Clara gestured to a chair and moved to the kitchen area, returning with 2 cups of water. The heat made coffee unthinkable. "Tell me," she said simply, sitting across from him. So Sam told her about the failing support beam, about Jonathan's quick action, about the hours it took him to die despite Sam's desperate efforts to staunch the bleeding. He didn't mention the promise. Not yet. Clara listened without interrupting, her face composed, though he noticed her fingers tightening on her cup. When he finished, She nodded slowly. That sounds like John, always playing the hero. A bitter smile touched her lips. Did he say anything at the end? This was the moment. Sam pulled out the letter, now creased and stained. He asked me to give you this, and he met her steady gaze. He asked me to marry you, to take care of you. He expected shock, perhaps tears or indignation. Instead, Clara actually laughed, a short, harsh sound. Of course he did. She took the letter but didn't open it. Let me guess. He told you I was delicate, in need of protection, too gentle for this rough country. Sam's silence was answer enough. Clara stood abruptly, pacing to the window. My brother meant well, Mr. Mackenzie, but he saw what he wanted to see. The truth is, I've been taking care of myself for years. I can shoot straight, balance a ledger, and I've faced down more than one drunken fool who thought a woman alone was easy prey. She turned back to him, arms crossed. I own this house outright. I take in sewing and sometimes work as a bookkeeper for the mercantile. I don't need a husband for protection or provision. Then why am I here? Sam asked. Genuinely curious now. This woman was nothing like he'd expected. Clara studied him for a long moment. Because you're an honorable man, aren't you? You made a promise to a dying friend, and now you're here to keep it, even though it's clear you'd rather be anywhere else. Sam couldn't deny it. I pay my debts, ma'am. As do I. She returned to her chair, her expression thoughtful. John saved your life. In his mind, that created an obligation for both of us. Me to honor his wishes, you to fulfill your promise. But if you don't need— I said I don't need a husband for protection, Clara interrupted. That doesn't mean marriage wouldn't have practical benefits. She spoke with the same matter-of-fact tone she might use to discuss the weather. A woman alone faces certain limitations in this society. There are business opportunities I can't pursue, property laws that favor married women, and, frankly, the constant fending off of unwanted suitors is tiresome. Sam found himself reassessing the woman before him. So you're suggesting a business arrangement? I'm suggesting we both honor John's wishes in a way that benefits us both. You need somewhere to live. I assume a base while you figure out your next move. I have room. I can cook, keep house, mend your clothes. In exchange, the marriage would give me legal protections and social standing. We could revisit the arrangement in a year, see if it still suits. It was perhaps the strangest marriage proposal Sam had ever witnessed, and he'd seen some odd things in mining camps. Yet there was something refreshing about Clara's directness, her lack of feminine wiles or manipulation. You don't know anything about me, he pointed out. I know you were John's friend for 3 years. I know you're here, which speaks to your character. And I know you're uncomfortable with this situation, but trying to do right by everyone. She smiled, and it transformed her face. That's more than most marriages start with. Sam considered. He'd planned to stay in Tombstone anyway. Maybe try to find work that didn't involve crawling through dark tunnels, having a place to live, someone to share expenses with. It made practical sense. I'm not an easy man, he warned. I've been living rough for years. I don't know much about being a husband, and I don't know much about being a wife. Clara countered. Perhaps that makes us even. They sat in silence for a moment, sizing each other up like card players deciding whether to bet or fold. Finally, Sam extended his hand. All right, Miss Whitmore, but we do this proper, a real marriage, even if it starts as business. I'll work, contribute to the household, treat you with respect, and you'll— He paused, uncertain how to define her part. I'll be your wife in all the ways that matter for appearance and legality, Clara said, shaking his hand with a firm grip. We'll be partners. Mr. Mackenzie, equal partners. As their hands met, Sam felt the calluses on her palm and realized that Jonathan, in his brotherly blindness, had completely misunderstood his sister. Clara Whitmore was no delicate flower. She was forged steel wrapped in calico, and Sam suspected life with her would be anything but simple. "When?" he asked. "3 days. That'll give us time to arrange things. And you can get cleaned up and find lodging until then." She paused. "Unless you'd prefer to wait longer." "3 days is fine." Sam stood, settling his hat back on his head. "I'll see you then, Miss Whitmore," as he walked back to his horse. Sam couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just agreed to something far more complicated than a simple promise to a dying friend. Clara Whitmore was a force to be reckoned with, and he had a suspicion that their practical arrangement might become something neither of them expected. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting Tombstone in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere, a coyote howled, and the evening shift was heading to the mines. Life in this rough town would continue its rhythm. But Sam Mackenzie had just agreed to change his own tune entirely. He mounted his horse and headed toward the lodging house. Jonathan's letter now in Clara's possession and his promise on its way to being kept. But as he rode through the dusty streets, Sam couldn't stop thinking about those intelligent brown eyes and that firm handshake. He'd come to Tombstone to discharge a debt, but something told him he might have just found something else entirely. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and mercilessly hot, like most days in Tombstone. Sam stood before the cracked mirror in his lodging room, attempting to tame his hair with water and determination. He'd bought a new shirt for the occasion, nothing fancy, but clean and pressed. His boots, polished for the first time in months, looked almost respectable. The small church sat at the edge of town, its whitewashed walls already radiating heat despite the early hour. Reverend Michaels, a thin man who looked like he'd been dried out by the desert sun, waited at the altar with an expression of mild boredom. 2 passing miners, recruited at the last minute, served as witnesses, still dusty from their night shift. Clara arrived precisely on time, wearing a gray dress that managed to look both practical and dignified. She'd pinned a small cluster of desert wildflowers to her collar, the only concession to traditional bridal decoration. Her face was composed, businesslike, as if she were attending a town meeting rather than her own wedding. The ceremony was brief. They spoke their vows in steady voices, neither flinching at the words, "till death do us part." When Reverend Michaels pronounced them man and wife, there was an awkward pause where a kiss might have been expected. Instead, Sam offered his arm. Clara took it, and they walked out of the church as married strangers. The witnesses hurried off to the saloon, eager to spend the $1 Sam had given each of them. Reverend Michaels disappeared into the vestry. Within minutes, Sam and Clara stood alone outside the church, legally bound and utterly uncertain. "Well," Clara said finally, releasing his arm, "I suppose you should collect your things from the lodging house." The walk to her house, their house now, was silent except for the crunch of their footsteps and the distant sounds of the town waking up. Sam carried his saddlebags and bedroll, everything he owned in the world. It seemed precious little to bring to a marriage. Clara showed him to a small room at the back of the house. "This was John's," she said simply. "I've cleaned it out. You can arrange it however suits you." The room was sparse but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and hooks on the wall for clothes. Through the window, Sam could see a small yard with a vegetable garden struggling against the heat. "Thank you," he said, setting down his belongings. "Dinner's at 6, Clara replied. "I'll need to know your work schedule once you have one, so I can plan meals accordingly." With that practical statement, their married life began. The first days passed in careful politeness. Sam found work at the stamp mill, processing ore from the mines. It was hard work but above ground, which suited him fine. He left early each morning, returned covered in rock dust each evening. Clara had water heated for washing and dinner on the table precisely at 6. They ate in near silence, occasionally discussing the weather or town news. Afterward, Clara would sew or read while Sam cleaned and oiled his tools. They moved around each other like dancers who hadn't yet learned the steps, careful not to collide. It was on the fourth day that Sam saw the first glimpse of the woman behind Clara's controlled exterior. He'd come home to find the front door ajar and voices raised inside. Through the gap, he could see Clara facing down three rough-looking men, her hand resting casually on the revolver at her hip. "I told you last week, Mr. Hartley, your shirts will be ready when they're ready," she was saying, her voice calm despite the tension in the room. "Threatening me won't make my needle move any faster." The largest of the men, presumably Hartley, leaned forward aggressively. "You said Friday, woman. It's Friday." "I said Friday if possible. Your friend Mr. Davies here brought me 6 shirts to mend on Wednesday, all needing extensive repair. Would you prefer I do rushed, sloppy work?" "I'd prefer you keep your word," Hartley growled, taking a step closer. Sam had seen enough. He pushed the door fully open, letting it bang against the wall. The men turned, and he was pleased to see uncertainty flicker in their eyes. Months of mine work had hardened his body, and he knew how to project menace when needed. "Gentlemen," he said mildly, "I believe my wife explained the situation." "Your wife," Davies, a smaller man with ferret-like features, looked between them. "Since when is Clara Whitmore married?" "Since Monday," Clara said, her hand never leaving her gun. "Sam, these gentlemen were just leaving." Hartley's face reddened. "Now see here." "No, you see here," Sam interrupted, his mild tone developing an edge. "You'll collect your shirts when they're finished. You'll pay what you owe, and you'll address my wife with respect. Or you'll find another seamstress. Clear." The 3 men grumbled but backed toward the door. Hartley shot them both a venomous look. "This ain't over." "It is," Sam assured him, following them onto the porch to ensure they left. When he came back inside, Clara was calmly returning to her sewing chair. "I could have handled them," she said without looking up. "I know." Sam hung his hat on the peg by the door. "But you shouldn't have to." She did look up then, studying him with those penetrating eyes. "Thank you," she said simply, then returned to her work. That evening, dinner included fresh bread, a luxury, and Clara actually initiated conversation, asking about his day at the mill. It was a small shift, but Sam felt something ease between them. The change came gradually over the following weeks. They developed routines, small considerations that spoke louder than words. Clara learned he liked his coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe. Sam discovered she had a weakness for peppermint sticks from the general store and started bringing them home on paydays. One evening, Sam came home to find Clara on the roof, hammering loose shingles. "What in blazes are you doing?" he called up, half amused, half alarmed. "Fixing the roof," she called back. "Mrs. Patterson mentioned her husband was planning to charge her $20 for the same work. I figured I could do it myself for the cost of shingles." Sam climbed the ladder, finding her competently nailing down new shingles. "Where'd you learn to do this?" "John taught me, before he got too caught up in dreams of silver." She hammered another nail with practiced ease. "He was practical once." They worked side by side as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. When they finished, they sat on the roof for a moment, catching their breath and watching the stars emerge. "You're not what I expected," Sam admitted. "Neither are you," Clara replied. "John described you as rough, maybe a little wild, but you're steady, reliable." "Disappointed." She turned to look at him, a slight smile playing at her lips. "No, relieved." As autumn approached, bringing marginally cooler temperatures, their partnership deepened. Clara helped organize the mill workers' efforts to demand better safety equipment. Sam repaired the vegetable garden fence and helped her expand the growing area. They still kept separate rooms, but increasingly spent evenings together, reading or talking by lamplight. The town began to accept them as a couple. The initial gossip about their sudden marriage faded, replaced by recognition of their steady reliability. Sam's protection allowed Clara to expand her seamstress business, taking on more prominent clients. His steady work and her careful management meant they could save money, something neither had managed alone. One night, a violent thunderstorm rolled through, rattling windows and sending lightning crackling across the sky. Sam woke to find Clara in the kitchen, heating milk on the stove. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, joining her. "Storms remind me of the night our parents died," she said quietly. "Wagon accident during a flash flood. John and I were staying with neighbors." Sam accepted the cup of warm milk she offered. "I'm sorry." "It was a long time ago." She wrapped her hands around her own cup. "John tried so hard to take care of me after that. I think that's why he could never see me as anything but his little sister who needed protecting." "He loved you," Sam said simply. "Yes, just not wisely." She smiled sadly. "He never understood that protecting someone and respecting them aren't mutually exclusive." They stood in comfortable silence, listening to the rain lash against the windows, without thinking. Sam reached over and squeezed her shoulder gently. She leaned into the touch slightly, just for a moment. "We should try to sleep," she said eventually, as they parted in the hallway. Clara paused. "Sam, I'm glad you kept your promise to John. Maybe not for the reasons he intended, but I'm glad." Lying in his narrow bed, listening to the storm pass, Sam realized he was glad too. What had begun as obligation had transformed into something else. Partnership, friendship, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something deeper. The autumn wind rattled the windows, but inside the small house, two people who had started as strangers were slowly finding their way to each other. The first cool breath of autumn swept through Tombstone like a benediction, breaking the stranglehold of summer's heat. Sam noticed it in the way Clara moved differently around the house, lighter, somehow, as if the oppressive weather had been weighing on her more than she'd let show. He noticed, too, how often he found himself watching her, cataloging these small changes. It had been 5 months since their wedding, and somewhere along the way, Sam had stopped thinking of their arrangement as temporary. The realization came to him gradually, in moments that seemed ordinary but left him unsettled. Clara laughing at something he'd said, the way morning light caught in her hair as she worked at her sewing, the simple comfort of her presence across the dinner table. The accident at the mill changed everything. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Sam was checking the stamp battery when young Tommy Morrison, eager and careless, engaged the mechanism too early. The massive iron stamp came down, and only Sam's quick reflexes saved him from losing his hand. As it was, the edge caught his shoulder, tearing through muscle and sending him crashing into the sorting table. He didn't remember the walk home. Mike Sullivan and another worker half carried him, his shirt soaked with blood, his left arm hanging useless. They burst through the front door to find Clara negotiating with a client over a wedding dress. "Dear God," she breathed, then became all motion. On the table, "Mike, fetch Dr. Morrison. Mrs. Aldrich." "I'm sorry, but you'll need to leave." The society woman huffed indignantly, but Clara had already turned away, gathering clean cloths and her medical supplies. Sam tried to protest as she cut away his ruined shirt, but she silenced him with a look. "Don't you dare apologize," she said firmly, her hand steady as she examined the wound. "And don't you dare pass out on me either." Dr. Morrison arrived within minutes. Tommy's father, grim-faced when he learned how the accident happened. Clara assisted, handing instruments and holding Sam steady when the doctor cleaned and stitched the gash. Through it all, her face remained composed, but Sam saw how white her knuckles were when she gripped his good hand. "He's lucky," Dr. Morrison said afterward, washing his hands in Clara's kitchen basin. "Inch lower and it would have shattered the joint. As it is, he'll heal. But he needs rest. No work for at least 2 weeks." "He'll have it," Clara said in a tone that brooked no argument. After the doctor left, Clara helped Sam to his room. He was weak from blood loss and the laudanum the doctor had given him for pain. She settled him on the bed, then surprised him by pulling the chair from the corner and sitting down. "You're staying?" he asked, words slightly slurred. "Someone needs to make sure you don't do something foolish like trying to go back to work tomorrow," she said, but her attempt at lightness didn't hide the tremor in her voice. "Clara, you scared me," she admitted quietly. "When they brought you in, all that blood." She took a shaky breath. "I've lost too many people. Sam, I won't lose you too." Through his haze of pain and medication, Sam felt something shift fundamentally between them. He reached out with his good hand, and she took it, holding tight. "I'm too stubborn to die," he managed. "Ask anyone." "Good," she said fiercely. "See that you remember that." The next days passed in a blur of pain, medication, and Clara's constant care. She managed his medicines, changed his bandages, and bullied him into eating when the pain stole his appetite. She moved her sewing into his room, working by the window while he slept, reading to him when he was wakeful. It was during one of these quiet afternoons that Sam finally voiced what had been growing in his heart. "Clara," he said, watching her work on a christening gown. "What are we doing?" She looked up, understanding his meaning immediately. "I don't know," she admitted. "This isn't what either of us planned." "No." He struggled to sit up straighter, wincing at the pull on his shoulder. "But maybe that's not a bad thing." She set aside her sewing, giving him her full attention. "What are you saying, Sam?" "I'm saying that I came here to fulfill a promise, and you agreed to a business arrangement, but somewhere along the way—" He paused, searching for words. "This became home. You became home." Clara's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. "Sam Mackenzie, are you trying to court your own wife?" "Maybe I am," he said seriously. "Maybe I want to do this right. Have a real marriage, not just a legal arrangement." She stood, pacing to the window. "I'm not an easy woman to live with. I'm set in my ways. I speak my mind, and I won't pretend to be something I'm not." "I'm not asking you to change," Sam said. "I'm asking if you might want to try building something real together. Not because John asked us to, but because we choose to." Clara turned back to him, her expression vulnerable in a way he'd rarely seen. "I've been choosing you for months now," she confessed. "Every time I made your coffee just right?" "Every time I waited up when you worked late. Every time I felt proud watching you stand up for what's right at the mill. I just didn't know how to say it." "Then say yes," Sam urged. "Let's have a real wedding. Not for the town or for propriety, but for us." She crossed the room and sat carefully on the edge of his bed. "You're serious?" "Never been more serious in my life." He caught her hand with his good one. "I love you, Clara. Not because I promised John I'd take care of you, but because you're brave and clever and kind. Because you make me want to be a better man. Because I can't imagine my life without you in it." Tears ran freely down her face now. "Oh, Sam, I love you too. I think I have for weeks, but I was so afraid." He pulled her down gently, mindful of his injured shoulder, and kissed her for the first time. It was sweet and tentative, full of promise and newfound understanding. When they broke apart, Clara was laughing through her tears. "Mrs. Patterson is going to be insufferable. She's been predicting this for months." "Let her gloat," Sam said, thumb brushing away her tears. "So, will you marry me again?" "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'll marry you again. Sam Mackenzie. But this time, I'm wearing flowers in my hair and you're kissing me properly in front of everyone." They held each other carefully, mindful of his injury but unwilling to let go. Outside, the afternoon sun slanted through the window, painting the room in golden light. In the distance, the sounds of Tombstone continued. Horses, hammering, the occasional shout. But inside their small room, Two people who had started as strangers celebrated finding love in the most unexpected way. Over the following days, as Sam's shoulder slowly healed, they made plans. A small ceremony at the church, a dinner at the hotel for their friends, a real wedding night in their own home. Clara moved through the days with a lightness Sam had never seen before, and he found himself grinning at odd moments. Despite the pain in his shoulder, "You look like a fool," she told him one evening, catching him smiling at nothing. "You're a fool," he corrected, pulling her close with his good arm. "Yes," she agreed, rising on her toes to kiss him. "My fool entirely." Mike Sullivan spread the news at the mill, and soon the whole town knew that the Mackenzies were planning to renew their vows. If anyone found it odd that a couple married only 5 months wanted a second ceremony, they kept it to themselves. Perhaps they recognized what Sam and Clara had discovered, that sometimes the best love stories begin with duty and bloom into choice, that promises kept for the wrong reasons can lead to the rightest of outcomes. As Sam's shoulder healed and he prepared to return to work, he marveled at how much had changed. He'd ridden into Tombstone to discharge a debt and found instead a future. He'd married a stranger out of obligation and discovered a partner, a friend, a love he hadn't known he was looking for. And Clara, who had accepted a marriage of convenience rather than burden her brother's memory with refusal, had found in Sam someone who saw her truly, not as a woman who needed protection, but as an equal worthy of respect, partnership, and love. The autumn wind carried the promise of change, and in a small house on the respectable side of Tombstone, two people prepared to pledge themselves to each other again, this time with full hearts and clear eyes, choosing love over duty, partnership over mere arrangement. Winter descended on Tombstone with unusual ferocity that year, as if nature itself had decided to test the limits of human endurance. The temperature plummeted, and while snow was rare in the desert, a bitter wind cut through the town like a knife, carrying dust and ice in equal measure. The mountains surrounding the valley turned gray and forbidding, their peaks lost in low-hanging clouds. Sam had returned to work at the mill just in time to receive the devastating news silver prices had collapsed. Eastern markets were flooded, speculation had driven values down, and the Tombstone mines were feeling the squeeze. 2 weeks after their second wedding, a joyful affair despite its modesty, the mill announced it would cut shifts in half. "We'll manage," Clara said that evening, her voice steady despite the worry in her eyes. They sat at their kitchen table, ledger open between them, candle flame flickering in the draft that snuck through the window frames. Sam stared at the numbers, jaw tight. Half wages meant they'd barely cover rent and food. Nothing left for the savings they'd carefully accumulated. "I can look for work at other mines." "They're all cutting back," Clara interrupted gently. "Mrs. Patterson heard the good enough is laying off a third of their men. The tough nut might close entirely." The weight of responsibility pressed on Sam's shoulders heavier than any mine timber. A husband was supposed to provide, to protect, to ensure security. Instead, he was bringing home half pay while prices in town remained stubbornly high. "I'll take on more sewing," Clara said, already planning. "Mrs. Aldrich has been asking about new curtains for her parlor, and there's always mending." "You're already working sunrise to sunset," Sam protested. "Then I'll work by lamplight too." She reached across the table, covering his clenched fist with her hand. "We're partners. Remember, for better or worse." The worst came faster than expected. The Hartley brothers, still nursing their grudge from months before, spread word that Clara was desperate for money, implying things about her character that made Sam's blood boil. Several of her regular clients suddenly found other seamstresses. Then the Mercantile, facing its own shortfalls, stopped hiring her for bookkeeping. Sam found additional work where he could, unloading freight wagons in the freezing pre-dawn hours, mucking stables, splitting wood for the wealthy households on Nob Hill. He'd stumble home exhausted and numb with cold to find Clara still bent over her sewing, squinting in the poor light. her fingers red and swollen from countless needle pricks. "Come to bed," he'd urge, but she'd shake her head. "Just a few more seams, Mrs. Morrison needs this tomorrow." Their second wedding had made them truly husband and wife, sharing not just a house but a bed, their bodies seeking warmth and comfort in the cold nights. But exhaustion and worry took their toll. They'd fall asleep mid-conversation, too tired for anything but the most basic survival. The house grew colder as they rationed wood. Ice formed on the inside of windows, and they took to wearing coats indoors. Meals became monotonous beans, cornbread, occasional salt pork when they could afford it. Clara's carefully tended garden lay dormant under frost, providing nothing. "I've been thinking," Sam said one particularly brutal evening, watching Clara rub her cramped hands. "Maybe you should go to Tucson. Your cousin there." "Don't!" Her voice was sharp. "Don't you dare suggest I leave." "Clara, be reasonable. You're killing yourself here." "And you're not." She stood abruptly, chair scraping. "Look at yourself. Sam, you've lost weight. You're working jobs that would break a younger man. And for what pride?" "For us," he shot back. "To keep a roof over our heads, food on the table." "I don't care about the roof or the food." The words erupted from her. "I care about you, about us. We survived separately before, Sam, but barely. We were just existing. Now we have something worth fighting for." They stared at each other across the small kitchen, breath misting in the cold air. Then Clara's shoulders sagged. "I'm tired," she admitted quietly. "Bone tired. Scared, too. But I'm more scared of losing what we've built than I am of being cold or hungry." Sam crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. She was thinner than when they'd married, her body angular where it had been soft. "I'm sorry," he murmured into her hair. I feel like I'm failing you." "You could only fail me by giving up," she said against his chest. "We knew life wouldn't be easy, but we chose each other. Remember, that means we face this together." They held each other in the cold kitchen, drawing strength from shared warmth. Outside, the wind howled, rattling loose boards and sending tumbleweeds careening down empty streets. But inside, two people who had found love in the most unlikely circumstances renewed their determination to survive. The next morning brought unexpected hope. Mike Sullivan appeared at their door, hat in hand despite the cold. "Sam, Clara," he nodded to each. "I've got a proposition. Me and some of the boys. We're talking about starting our own operation, small scale, working the claims the big companies abandoned. Equal shares for equal work. You interested?" It was risky, independent mining operations failed more often than they succeeded. But it was work. And more importantly, it was hope. "Count me in," Sam said immediately. Clara squeezed his hand. "What do you need from me? I can keep books, manage supplies." Mike grinned. "Was hoping you'd say that. We need someone with a head for numbers." Over the following weeks, the cooperative took shape. 8 men pooling resources, working abandoned claims with hand tools and determination. Clara managed their meager funds with ruthless efficiency, stretching every dollar, negotiating with suppliers who respected her sharp mind even as they grumbled about dealing with a woman. The work was harder than the mill. No machinery, just muscle and will against stone. Sam would come home so exhausted he could barely eat, hands bleeding despite thick gloves, back screaming from hours bent in cramped tunnels. But there was silver. Not much, but enough to keep hope alive. Clara, meanwhile, had quietly started teaching Mrs. Sullivan and Mrs. O'Brien to read and keep simple accounts. Word spread, and soon she had a small school running from their kitchen 2 evenings a week. Miners' wives paying what they could, a few pennies, a loaf of bread, preserved vegetables from summer gardens. "You're amazing," Sam told her one night, watching her patiently guide Mrs. Muller through basic arithmetic. "We all do what we can," Clara replied, but he saw the pleased flush on her cheeks. Slowly, painfully, they began to climb out of the hole Winter had dug for them. The cooperative found a promising vein, not rich enough to attract the big companies, but sufficient for men willing to work hard. Clara's teaching brought in small but steady income and, more importantly, built goodwill among the mining families. One evening, Sam came home to find Clara sitting by the stove, tears on her face. His heart clenched. What new disaster had struck? "What is it?" he asked, dropping to his knees beside her chair. She held out a letter. "From Tucson, my cousin. She heard about our troubles from someone. Offered to send money." "That's good." "We don't need it," Clara interrupted, smiling through her tears. "Sam, we don't need it. We're making it on our own. Together." He understood then why she was crying. They'd been tested by winter, by poverty, by the crushing weight of survival in an unforgiving land. And they'd endured. Not just endured, they'd found ways to help others along the way. "No," he agreed, pulling her close. "We don't need it. We have everything we need right here." That night, as they lay together under every blanket they owned, Sam thought about the journey that had brought them to this point. A promise to a dying friend had led to a marriage of convenience, which had transformed into love, which had been tested by hardship and emerged stronger. "Spring will come," Clara murmured against his shoulder. "It always does," Sam agreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Outside, the winter wind continued its assault on Tombstone, but inside their small, cold house, Sam and Clara Mackenzie had found something that transcended seasons, a partnership built on mutual respect, strengthened by adversity, and warmed by love that had chosen to endure. Spring arrived like a miracle, painting the desert in colors Sam had forgotten existed. Brittlebush bloomed yellow across the hillsides, and the Palo Verde trees erupted in tiny golden flowers. After the harsh winter, the warmth felt like a benediction on his skin as he walked home from the mine. Paycheck in his pocket, a real paycheck, not the meager scraps they'd survived on for months. The cooperative had struck a rich vein 3 weeks ago. Not a bonanza, but steady, good-quality silver that assayed well. They'd hired on 4 more men, and Sam had been elected foreman, the others trusting his level head and fair dealing. It meant longer hours but better pay, and more importantly, stability. He found Clara in the garden, coaxing life back into the soil. She'd expanded the growing area, and neat rows of seedlings stretched toward the sun. Her sleeves were rolled up, dirt smudged on her cheek, and Sam thought she'd never looked more beautiful. "Successful day?" she asked, looking up with that smile that still caught him off guard. "Wells Fargo took our shipment. Full price, no haggling." He couldn't keep the pride from his voice. "Mike thinks if the vein holds, we'll all be able to buy proper houses by year's end." Clara stood, brushing dirt from her skirts. "About that?" She bit her lip, a gesture he recognized as nervous excitement. "I've been thinking, what if we didn't buy in town? What if we looked for land outside Tombstone? Just a small plot, maybe with water rights. We could have a real garden, maybe some chickens, a milk cow." Sam pulled her close, not caring about the dirt. "You've been dreaming again." "Practical dreams," she corrected. "With what you're earning and my teaching money. Did I tell you, Mrs.? Garcia asked me to tutor her daughters. We could save enough for a down payment by fall." He could see it in his mind's eye, a small ranch house. Clara's garden spreading green and abundant. Mountains in the distance. A place that was truly theirs. Not rented rooms in someone else's building. "Let's do it," he said, surprising himself with a quick decision. "Let's find our place." Clara's kiss tasted of joy and possibility. Over the following weeks, they spent Sundays riding out to look at properties. Some were too expensive, others too far from water. But the search itself became an adventure. They'd pack simple lunches and make a day of it, talking about their plans as Sam's horse picked its way along dusty trails. It was on one of these excursions that they found it 10 acres nestled in a valley, with a seasonal creek and an old adobe cabin that needed work but had solid bones. The elderly Mexican owner, Senor Valdez, was moving to live with his daughter in Tucson. "It's perfect," Clara breathed, standing on what would be the front porch, looking out over the land. "It needs everything," Sam warned, but he was smiling. "New roof, the well needs to be redug, fencing." "We've faced worse," Clara reminded him. "And we have time. We don't have to do it all at once." They signed the papers in May, using every cent they'd saved for the down payment. Senor Valdez, charmed by Clara's determination and Sam's honest face, agreed to payments over 3 years for the rest. The first months were a blur of work. Sam spent his days at the mine and his evenings at the property, joined by Mike and the other cooperative members who pitched in with the heavy labor. Clara organized the women, and soon the cabin was scrubbed clean, curtains hung, and a vegetable garden planted. "You're building something good here," Mike said one evening, sharing a beer with Sam on the newly repaired porch. "Not just the house, all of it." Sam knew what he meant. The cooperative had become more than a business venture. It was a community. The men looked out for each other in the dangerous tunnels, and their families had formed bonds strengthened by shared hardship and mutual aid. By midsummer, they were ready to move. Their possessions barely filled the wagons Sam borrowed, but Clara treated each item like treasure as she arranged their new home. Her sewing machine went by the window with the best light. Sam's books on the shelf he'd built himself. The quilt her mother had made spread on their bed. That first night in their own place, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. Coyotes called in the distance, and somewhere an owl hooted. "I need to tell you something," Clara said quietly. Sam turned to look at her, alerted by something in her tone. "I haven't been feeling well. Tired. Sick in the mornings." She took a deep breath. "So I went to see Dr. Morrison yesterday." Sam's heart clenched. After all they'd survived. Was she ill? What did he say? Clara took his hand, placing it on her still flat belly. "He said I'm carrying our child, due around Christmas." For a moment, Sam couldn't speak. A baby. Their baby. Joy and terror warred in his chest. Joy at this new life. Terror at the responsibility. At all that could go wrong in this harsh land. "Say something," Clara whispered. "I love you," he managed. "God, Clara, I love you so much." He pulled her onto his lap, holding her carefully as if she might break. "A baby. Our baby. Our baby," she confirmed, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Are you happy?" Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He kissed her deeply, then pulled back to study her face. "Are you?" This wasn't exactly planned. "Nothing about us has gone according to plan," Clara pointed out. "But somehow it all works out right." She cupped his face in her hands. "Yes, I'm happy. Scared too, but mostly happy." They sat together as full dark settled over their land, making plans. The small room off the kitchen would be the nursery. Clara would cut back on tutoring as her time grew near. They'd need to save more, prepare for the expense of a child. "We'll teach him to be strong," Sam said, "to work hard, to treat people fair." "Or her," Clara corrected. "We'll teach her to be independent, to use her mind, to stand up for what's right." "Him or her," Sam agreed. "We'll teach them about love, about choosing to build something together even when it's hard." The summer passed in a golden haze of work and preparation. The mine continued to produce, and Sam's leadership of the cooperative earned him respect throughout the district. Clara's garden flourished, and she put up preserves for the winter, her movements growing more careful as her belly rounded. One evening, as Sam helped her can peaches from the tree Senor Valdez had planted years ago, she suddenly gasped and grabbed his hand. "What's wrong?" Panic flared in his chest. "Nothing's wrong," She placed his palm on her belly. "Wait." And then he felt it, a flutter, like a bird's wing, beneath his hand. Their child, moving. "That's our baby," Clara said, wonder in her voice. "That's our baby," Sam echoed, dropping to his knees to press his ear to her belly. "Hello in there. This is your papa. I want you to know something. You're already loved. More than all the silver in these mountains. More than all the stars in the desert sky." Clara ran her fingers through his hair, and when he looked up, her face was radiant with love. "We've come so far from that day you knocked on my door." "Jonathan would be proud," Sam said softly. "I think he would," Clara agreed. "He wanted us to take care of each other. Maybe not quite like this, but still." As autumn approached, bringing cooler temperatures and spectacular sunsets, Sam often found himself standing on their porch, surveying what they'd built. The house was simple but sound, the garden productive, the well flowing clear and cool. Inside, Clara sewed tiny clothes and sang to their unborn child. They'd started with a promise and a practical arrangement. They'd weathered suspicion, poverty, and hardship. And now, as the seasons turned and new life grew within Clara, they'd arrived at something neither had dared dream of in those early days: a true home, a loving partnership, and a future bright with possibility. The cooperative had found another good vein, and there was talk of becoming a proper company. Clara had been asked to help establish a school in Tombstone, her teaching having earned her a reputation. But best of all was the quiet moments. Clara reading aloud while Sam oiled his tools, sharing supper as the day cooled, lying together at night with his hand on her belly, feeling their child move. "No regrets?" Clara asked one such night. Sam kissed her temple. "Not one, Only that we didn't find each other sooner," she admitted. "Think of all the time we'd wasted being strangers." "Nothing was wasted," Sam said firmly. "Everything that came before led us here, and here is exactly where we're meant to be." Outside, a desert wind sang through the valleys and canyons, carrying the scent of creosote and sage. But inside their adobe walls, Sam and Clara Mackenzie rested in the peace they'd earned, their love a shelter against whatever storms might come, their future growing as surely as the child within Clara's womb. The year turned toward winter, with Clara growing round as a harvest moon. Sam watched her navigate their small home with increasing care, one hand supporting her back, the other often resting protectively on her belly. Despite her burden, she maintained the household with quiet efficiency, though Sam had taken over the heavier tasks, hauling water, tending the fire, managing the garden as it prepared for dormancy. Dr. Morrison made monthly visits now, declaring Clara healthy but warning about the rigors of childbirth, especially for a first-time mother approaching 30. Sam tried not to let his worries show, but Clara saw through him as she always did. "Women have been doing this since Eve," she told him one evening, settling awkwardly into her chair by the fire. "I'm strong. Sam, we both know that." "I know," he said, kneeling to remove her shoes, her feet swollen from the day's work. "But knowing and feeling are different things." She stroked his hair as he massaged her feet. "Tell me what you're thinking." "I'm thinking about how brave you are, how you've faced everything, our awkward beginning, that hard winter, building this place without complaint." He looked up at her. "And I'm thinking I can't lose you. Not now. Not when we've built all this." "You won't lose me," Clara said firmly. "I'm far too stubborn to leave you to raise this child alone. Can you imagine you'd have them living on beans and cornbread within a week?" Her joke lightened the moment, as she'd intended. But Sam saw the flicker of fear in her eyes too. Childbirth on the frontier was dangerous. They both knew women who hadn't survived it. As December approached, the women of their community rallied around Clara, Mrs. Sullivan organized a sewing bee, where a dozen women gathered to make baby clothes and quilts. Mrs. O'Brien shared recipes for strengthening broths. Even Mrs. Patterson, the inveterate gossip, contributed a beautiful cradle her own children had used. "You've made good friends," Sam observed, watching Clara sort through the bounty of tiny garments. "We both have," Clara corrected. "This community we've built, it matters. Sam, our child will grow up surrounded by good people." The mine continued to produce steadily, and Sam had managed to put aside money for the doctor's fee and any emergencies. The cooperative had weathered its first full year, and there was talk of expansion. But all of that faded to background noise as Clara's time approached. It started on a cold December morning. 2 weeks before Christmas, Sam was preparing to leave for the mine when Clara gasped, gripping the table's edge. "It's time," she said, her face pale but determined. Sam's carefully laid plans scattered like dust. He ran for Mrs. Sullivan, sent her son for the doctor, built up the fire, heated water, all while fighting the urge to simply hold Clara and never let go. Dr. Morrison arrived within the hour, calm and professional. "First babies take their time," he assured Sam. "You might want to wait outside." "No!" Clara's voice was fierce. "He stays!" The doctor looked ready to argue, but something in Clara's expression stopped him. "Very well, but you do exactly as I say. Mr. Mackenzie." What followed were the longest hours of Sam's life. Clara labored through the day and into the night, her strength tested in ways that made their previous hardships seem trivial. Sam held her hand, wiped her brow, supported her when she needed to walk, and whispered encouragement when she faltered. "I can't," she gasped at one point, exhausted and trembling. "You can," Sam said firmly. "You're the strongest person I know. Clara Mackenzie, you survived that winter. You built this home. You changed my life. You can do this." Mrs. Sullivan appeared periodically with broths and encouragement. The doctor remained steady, monitoring progress, offering reassurance, and through it all, Clara endured with a courage that humbled Sam. As dawn broke on December 21st, their son entered the world with a lusty cry that was the sweetest sound Sam had ever heard. The doctor cleaned the baby and placed him in Clara's arms, and Sam felt his heart expand beyond what he'd thought possible. "He's perfect," Clara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Look at him, Sam." The baby was red and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air. Sam touched one of those impossibly small hands, and the baby gripped his finger with surprising strength. "Jonathan Samuel Mackenzie," Clara said softly, "for the two men who brought us together." "Johnny," Sam tried out the nickname. "Hello, Johnny. Welcome to the world." The doctor finished his work. Mrs. Sullivan helped Clara get comfortable, and soon the three of them were alone, their first moments as a complete family. Sam sat on the bed beside Clara, his arm around her as she held their son. "We did it," Clara murmured, exhausted but radiant. "You did it," Sam corrected. "I've never seen anything braver." "We did it," Clara insisted. "I couldn't have managed without you." Johnny stirred, making small sounds, and Clara guided him to nurse with instinct old as time. Sam watched in wonder. This primal scene of mother and child that somehow contained all the beauty and fragility of life. Over the following days, their home filled with visitors. The mining families came to pay respects, bringing food and small gifts. Mike Sullivan declared Johnny would be a natural leader. Got the grip for it already. The Mexican families from neighboring ranches brought tamales and blessings. Even some of Clara's former sewing clients from town made the journey, curiosity overcoming old prejudices. "You've done well for yourself, Mrs. Mackenzie." "Mrs.," Aldrich said stiffly, peering at the baby. "Against all expectations." Clara, tired but triumphant, smiled sweetly. "Love has a way of exceeding expectations. Mrs. Aldrich." Christmas passed in a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and precious moments of sleep. Sam had strung pine boughs around the house, and Clara had made simple decorations. But their real celebration was Johnny himself, their miracle, their future. "I never imagined this," Sam confessed one night, Johnny asleep in the cradle beside their bed. "When I rode into Tombstone that day, I thought I was just keeping a promise. I never dreamed." "Neither did I," Clara admitted. "I thought I was being practical, making the best of an awkward situation." She turned in his arms to face him. "Sam, do you remember what I said when we first met about us being partners?" "I remember everything about that day. We're more than partners now. We're a family, a real family, built on choice and love and stubborn determination." She kissed him softly. "Thank you for keeping that promise to John. Thank you for being brave enough to try. Thank you for being brave enough to say yes," Sam replied, as winter deepened around their small ranch. They settled into new rhythms. Sam worked his shifts at the mine but hurried home each evening, eager to hold his son and hear about Clara's day. She recovered slowly but steadily, her strength returning as she adapted to motherhood with the same practical grace she brought to everything. Johnny grew rapidly, his unfocused newborn gaze sharpening into alert observation. He had Clara's intelligent eyes and what Sam swore was already a stubborn set to his tiny jaw. At night, Sam would hold him while Clara rested, walking the floor and telling him stories. "Your Uncle John saved my life," he'd whisper. "If he hadn't, I'd never have met your mama, and you wouldn't be here. So in a way, you're his gift to us. We'll make sure you know about him, about sacrifice and friendship and keeping promises." Clara would teach him too, Sam knew. She'd teach him to read and cipher, to think for himself, to see beyond surface appearances. Together, they'd raise him to be strong but kind, practical but capable of dreams. One evening, as snow dusted the mountains and Johnny slept peacefully, Clara found Sam on the porch despite the cold. "What are you thinking?" she asked, wrapping a blanket around both their shoulders. "About circles," Sam said. "How life moves in circles. John saved me. I married you. We saved each other. And now we have Johnny. Someday he'll grow up, maybe save someone else, create his own circles." "That's either very profound or you're very tired," Clara teased gently. "Both," Sam admitted, pulling her closer. "But mostly I'm grateful. For all of it, the good and the bad, the struggles and the joys. They all led us here." "Here is good," Clara agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. "Here is very good." Inside, Johnny began to fuss, and they went in together to tend their son. As Clara settled into the rocking chair Sam had made and began to nurse, Sam built up the fire and lit the lamps against the gathering dark. Simple acts, domestic and unremarkable, yet containing everything that mattered. The frontier was still harsh, the future uncertain. The mine could play out. Accidents could happen, illness could strike, but they'd weathered storms before and emerged stronger. Now they had even more reason to persist. A child to raise, a legacy to build, a love that had transformed duty into devotion. Outside, the desert winter wind howled across the valley, but inside their adobe walls, the Mackenzie family was warm and whole, bound together by choice and chance, sacrifice and stubbornness, and most of all, by love that had grown from the rockiest soil into something beautiful and enduring. The blood had seemed endless that December night, pooling beneath Clara despite the doctor's frantic efforts. Sam remembered every detail with crystalline clarity, the metallic smell, Clara's face growing paler by the moment, the baby's cries seeming to come from very far away. He'd gripped her hand as Dr. Morrison worked, whispering prayers he hadn't said since childhood. "Stay with me," he'd begged. "Clara, please, stay with me." Her eyes had fluttered open, finding his face. The baby. "He's perfect, perfect, just like his mama." Sam had smoothed her sweat-soaked hair back. "You did so good, sweetheart, so good. Now you rest and get strong." The doctor's face had been grim as he worked to stop the hemorrhaging. Mrs. Sullivan moved with swift efficiency, changing blood-soaked linens, keeping pressure where the doctor directed. The women had seen this before, the price sometimes demanded for bringing life into the world. "Sam," Clara had whispered, her voice thread-thin. "If I don't—" "Don't say it," his voice had broken. "Don't you dare say it. Listen." Even weak as she was, Clara's tone held that familiar determination. "Tell Johnny about me. Not just the facts, but tell him I loved him before I even knew him. Tell him—" "You'll tell him yourself." Sam had insisted. "Every day for the next 50 years, you'll tell him yourself." The hours that followed blurred together, the doctor's terse commands, Mrs. Sullivan's quiet prayers, Clara drifting in and out of consciousness. Sam held their son when Mrs. Sullivan insisted, but his eyes never left Clara's face. Johnny had nursed once, instinct guiding both mother and child, before Clara became too weak. "She's a fighter," Dr. Morrison had said as dawn broke, exhaustion lining his face. The bleeding slowed. If she makes it through today— She'd made it through that day, and the next, though fever came calling like an unwelcome visitor. Sam barely left her side, spooning broth between her lips, bathing her burning skin with cool cloths, whispering stories of their future when she was lucid enough to hear. The community rallied. Mike Sullivan took over Sam's shifts at the mine, refusing any talk of repayment. Women came in rotation: Mrs. O'Brien with her healing teas, Mrs. Garcia with goat's milk for Johnny when Clara couldn't nurse. Even Mrs. Patterson setting aside gossip to help with the endless laundry. "You saved my Billy that winter," Mrs. Patterson had said simply when Sam tried to thank her. "Clara sat up all night with him when he had the croup. We don't forget." On the 5th day, Clara's fever broke. She woke clear-eyed to find Sam dozing in the chair beside the bed, Johnny cradled in his arms. "You both need a bath," she'd said weakly. Sam's eyes had snapped open, tears flowing unchecked when he saw her lucid gaze. "Clara! Oh, thank God! Clara!" "I'm here," she'd assured him, though her voice was whisper-soft. "I told you I was too stubborn to leave." Recovery came slowly. Clara, who'd always been the strong one, found herself dependent in ways that chafed at her pride. She couldn't walk across the room without exhaustion claiming her. Couldn't lift Johnny without her arms trembling. The simple act of nursing left her drained. "I hate this," she confessed one afternoon, tears of frustration sliding down her cheeks. "I hate being weak." Sam settled beside her on the bed, Johnny in his arms. "You're not weak. You're healing. There's a difference." "I should be caring for him. For you. Instead, I'm just lying here." "You're doing the most important thing," Sam said firmly. "You're getting well. Johnny needs his mama whole and healthy, not pushing herself too hard too fast." Slowly, painfully, Clara did heal. By February, she could sit up for longer periods. By March, she was walking the length of the house. The desert spring arrived with its riot of wildflowers, and Sam carried her to the porch to see them, Johnny in her arms. "Look," she told their son, who gazed at the world with serious dark eyes. "Beauty after the storm. Always remember that. My love, there's always beauty after the storm." Sam expanded Clara's teaching into a proper school, converting their barn into a classroom. Students came from miles around, miners' children, ranchers' kids, even some Apache children whose families had settled nearby. Clara taught from her chair at first, then standing for longer periods as her strength returned. A Mrs. Mackenzie's School, people called it, and the name filled Sam with pride. Education was transforming their corner of the frontier, one child at a time. The mine continued to produce, and the cooperative expanded, bringing in new families. Sam's leadership, tested during Clara's illness when he'd had to balance work and caregiving, had earned him even greater respect. Men who might have scorned him for doing women's work instead saw a man who understood that family came first. Johnny grew like a desert weed after rain, strong and sturdy. He had Clara's quick mind, evident even in infancy in the way he studied everything with those serious eyes. But he had Sam's steady temperament, rarely fussing, content to observe the world from his mother's arms or his father's shoulders. "He'll be brilliant," Clara said one evening, watching Johnny track the flight of a hawk through the window. "I can already tell." "Let's hope he's smart enough to avoid his parents' mistakes," Sam replied. "What mistakes?" Clara challenged. "Everything we did, even the hard parts, led us here." She was right. Sam knew. The awkward beginning, the harsh winter, Clara's brush with death, all of it had forged them into something unbreakable. By summer, Clara was fully recovered. Though Sam noticed she tired more easily than before, she adapted, as she always did, delegating tasks and conserving energy for what mattered most. The school thrived, Johnny grew, and their small ranch prospered. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset paint the mountains purple, Johnny sleeping in Clara's arms, she spoke quietly. "I've been thinking about John lately." Sam looked at her, waiting. "He saved your life, which led you to me, which gave us Johnny." She smiled softly. "In a way, he's still taking care of us, still part of our story. Should we tell Johnny when he's older?" "Everything," Clara said firmly. "About the promise, about how we started, about how love can grow in the unlikeliest places. He should know that family isn't always simple or easy, but it's always worth fighting for." They sat in companionable silence, watching the first stars emerge. Inside the house, evidence of their life together filled every corner. Sam's mining tools cleaned and ready. Clara's lesson plans spread on the table. Johnny's cradle moved to catch the morning light. "I love you," Sam said suddenly. "I don't say it enough." "You say it every day," Clara corrected. "In how you work to provide for us, how you helped me heal, how you look at our son. Words are nice, but actions matter more." Still, he kissed her temple. "I love you, Clara Mackenzie, for your strength, your stubbornness, your brilliant mind, for giving me a son, for nearly dying to do it, for fighting to stay with us." "I love you too," Clara replied, "for keeping an impossible promise, for seeing me as I really am, for becoming the man Johnny and I need." As full dark settled over the desert, they went inside. Clara settled Johnny in his cradle while Sam banked the fire and checked the lock's simple domestic rituals that held profound meaning for people who'd nearly lost everything. Later, as they lay together, Clara's head on Sam's chest, she spoke into the darkness. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if John hadn't died? If you'd never come to Tombstone?" "No," Sam said without hesitation. "This is our story. Wondering about different paths is like trying to change the course of a river. What matters is where we are now." "And where we're going," Clara added. "And where we're going," Sam agreed. Outside, coyotes called to each other across the darkness, and the desert wind carried the scent of sage and creosote. Inside, the Mackenzie family slept, safe in their hard-won home, bound by love that had been tested by blood and tears and emerged stronger. Clara's ordeal had reminded them how fragile life could be, but also how precious. Every ordinary day was a gift, every smile from their son a treasure. They'd started with duty and arrived at devotion. They'd faced death and chosen life. And in the years to come, they'd tell Johnny their story, all of it, the beautiful and the painful alike. He'd learn that love wasn't just the easy times, but the moments when you held on tight and refused to let go. He'd understand that family was built on sacrifice and stubbornness, promise-keeping and forgiveness. But for now, he slept peacefully between his parents, unaware of how close he'd come to losing his mother, knowing only the warmth and safety of their presence. And that, Sam thought as sleep claimed him, was exactly as it should be. Time moved like a patient river through the Arizona territory, carving its mark on the landscape and the people alike. 25 years had passed since Sam Mackenzie first knocked on Clara's door with a dying man's promise heavy in his pocket. Now, silver threads wove through his dark hair, and lines mapped the corners of his eyes. Laugh lines. Clara called them evidence of a life well lived. Their ranch had grown from 10 acres to 40, with a proper barn, corrals, and a 2-story house that had been expanded as their family grew. Johnny, now 24 and married himself, had built his own cabin on the eastern corner of the property. His wife, Sarah, a schoolteacher from Tucson, was expecting their first child. Beyond Johnny, 3 more children had blessed Sam and Clara's marriage. Mary, 21, taught alongside her mother at the school, which now occupied its own building in town. Thomas, 19, worked the mine with his father, showing the same steady temperament. And Elizabeth, sweet Lizzie, just 16, had her mother's fierce intelligence and her father's stubborn streak. "Tell us again about how you met," Lizzie demanded one evening as the family gathered for Sunday dinner. It was a familiar request, one that never grew old. Clara and Sam exchanged glances across the table, that private communication that comes from decades of marriage. "Your father appeared at my door looking like he'd ridden through a dust storm," Clara began, as she always did. "Because I had," Sam interjected, playing his part. "And he told me he'd come to marry me because of a promise to Uncle John." The children knew the story by heart, but they never tired of hearing it. How their parents had started as strangers bound by duty. How love had grown slowly like a desert plant putting down deep roots. How they'd survived the hard winter and nearly lost each other when Johnny was born. "Was it really just duty at first?" Sarah asked, her hand resting on her own swollen belly. "Nothing else?" Sam considered the question, one he'd pondered often over the years. "I thought it was duty, but looking back, I think I was drawn to your mother-in-law from that first day. She stood there with a gun on her hip, telling me she didn't need protection, and I thought, now here's a woman worth knowing. And I thought he was honorable, but probably too rigid for his own good," Clara added, eyes twinkling. "Turns out I was half right." The family laughed, the sound filling the dining room with warmth. Outside, the desert evening was painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, the same colors that had witnessed their story from the beginning. After dinner, as the younger generation cleared dishes and talked among themselves, Sam and Clara stepped onto the porch. It had become their ritual, these quiet moments watching the sunset behind the mountains. "Do you miss it?" Clara asked. "The mining." Sam flexed his hands, still strong, but no longer suited for underground work. He'd retired from active mining 5 years ago, though he still consulted for the cooperative, which had grown into a successful company. Sometimes, the brotherhood of it, but not the danger, not the uncertainty. "The school board wants me to step down," Clara said quietly. "They say it's time for younger teachers." Sam turned to study his wife. At 54, she was still beautiful to him, though time had left its marks. The difficult birth with Johnny had taken something from her, and each subsequent pregnancy had been harder. But her mind remained sharp as a new blade. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want to keep teaching until I can't anymore," Clara said firmly. "But maybe they're right. Maybe it's time to let Mary and the others take over." "You've built something important," Sam reminded her. "Hundreds of children who can read and write because of you. That doesn't end just because you step back." They stood in comfortable silence, watching a hawk circle in the dying light. From inside came the sound of laughter. Their children and grandchild-to-be, the next generation of their unlikely love story. "I've been thinking about John lately," Clara said. "He'd be an old man now, if he'd lived." "He'd be proud," Sam said with certainty. Of you, of what we built, of the children. His sacrifice meant something. Everything, Clara corrected. It meant everything. As darkness settled over the ranch, they went inside to find their family engaged in a heated debate about water rights. Thomas arguing for expansion, Mary for conservation, Lizzie mediating with surprising diplomatic skill. Johnny and Sarah watched with amused patience, hands linked across the table. Just like your mother, Sam told Lizzie, always finding the middle ground. Someone has to be sensible in this family, Lizzie retorted, grinning. Later, after the younger folks had headed to their homes, Sam and Clara prepared for bed with the easy rhythm of long practice. Clara sat at her dressing table, unpinning her hair, still more brown than gray. Sam watched from the bed, struck as always by the intimacy of these small moments. What? Clara asked, catching his gaze in the mirror. Just thinking how lucky I am. After all these years, you're still a romantic. But she smiled as she said it. Your fault, Sam replied. You taught me that love was worth the risk. Clara came to bed, settling into his arms with a contented sigh. They fit together perfectly now. All the awkwardness of those early days long forgotten. The Hartley brothers' grandson applied to the school today, Clara mentioned. Full circle. Sam chuckled. Those old buzzards gave us such trouble in the beginning. Now their grandchildren come to learn from you. Time changes everything, Clara murmured. Not everything, Sam disagreed, pressing a kiss to her hair. Not the important things. They lay quiet, listening to the night sounds, wind in the cottonwoods they'd planted, a distant coyote, the creak of the house settling, the same sounds that had accompanied their journey from the beginning. Sam, Clara's voice was soft in the darkness. If you had it to do over, would you change anything? It was an old question between them, asked at pivotal moments over the years. Sam's answer never varied. Not one thing. Every step led us here. Even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts. They made us who we are. Clara turned in his arms to face him. I love you, Samuel Mackenzie. Thank you for keeping that promise. Thank you for saying yes, Sam replied, as he always did. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Sam woke early, as was his habit, and made coffee while Clara slept. He carried his cup onto the porch to watch the sunrise paint the mountains. Soon, Clara joined him, wrapped in a shawl against the morning chill. They stood together, not speaking, just being. In a few hours, the day would fill with responsibilities. Sam had a meeting with the cooperative board. Clara had lessons to plan, even if she was stepping back. But for now, there was just this two people who had found each other through tragedy and promise, who had built a life and a family on the uncertain foundation of the frontier. Look, Clara said, pointing to where Johnny and Sarah were walking in their garden, Johnny's hand protective on his wife's back, starting their own story. With a better beginning than ours, Sam noted. Different, Clara corrected. Not better, just different. A rider appeared on the horizon, the mail carrier, bringing news from the wider world. But Sam found he didn't much care what was happening beyond their valley. Everything that mattered was here Clara beside him, their children building their own lives, the land they'd made fruitful through hard work and determination. We did good, didn't we? Clara asked, echoing his thoughts. We did good, Sam agreed. As the sun climbed higher, they went inside to start their day. There would be other mornings like this, God-willing quiet moments stolen before the world demanded their attention. But Sam had learned not to take them for granted. Each day with Clara was a gift, paid for by a friend's sacrifice and earned through their own stubborn refusal to accept less than love. The story that had begun with "Carry me across the river and I'll be your bride," Clara's teasing words from their early days, had become something neither could have imagined. Not just a marriage, but a legacy. Not just a family, but a community. Not just survival, but a life fully lived. And, in the end, Sam thought as he watched Clara move through their kitchen with the grace of long practice, that was the truest way to honor a promise, not just to keep it, but to transform it into something greater than anyone had dared to dream. The desert sun climbed toward its zenith, and life on the Mackenzie ranch continued its familiar rhythm. But Sam and Clara knew that every ordinary moment was built on the extraordinary choice they'd made all those years ago, to turn duty into devotion, to make strangers into soulmates, to prove that love could bloom even in the harshest ground. As long as the Arizona sun rose over the mountains, their story would endure, in their children, in the lives they'd touched, in the proof that sometimes the best journeys begin with an unwilling step toward an uncertain destination. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Sam and Clara's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to hear from listeners around the world. Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. Did this story remind you of your own family's history? What part moved you the most? Let's connect and share our love for these tales of courage, determination, and unexpected love on the American frontier.